On a cold night, a black electrician struggling on the verge of eviction comes across a young woman, badly injured in a crash on a deserted road. Without hesitation, he rushes to help, calls 911, and stays by her side to make sure she's safe. But when he discovers her true identity, his entire life changes forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The night air hung heavy over the empty stretch of County Road 17, that long, lonely ribbon of cracked asphalt winding its way through the Georgia countryside just south of Savannah. It was the kind of road that most folks avoided after sundown, especially in October when the wind carried a sharp bite and the fields on either side turned into endless shadows. But for Malik Carter, 30 years old with broad shoulders, deep brown skin, and the kind of calloused hands that told you he earned every dollar he made, this road was just part of life. His old Dodge Ram pickup rattled and coughed as it rolled along, the headlights cutting through the dark like a worn-out flashlight barely holding on. Malik had been running on empty for months, not just his truck, with its engine that sputtered and growled at every hill, but his whole damn life. He wasn't one to complain much, but even a strong man had his limits. The jobs came when they came, usually short-term gigs rewiring old houses, fixing busted fuse boxes, crawling through tight attics with sweat dripping off his chin and fiberglass itching at his skin. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid most weeks. This week, though? This week wasn't most weeks. On the passenger seat, crumpled and stained with grease, sat the eviction notice he'd found taped to his apartment door that morning. 15 days, it said. 15 days to come up with $900 in back rent or pack up and leave. He'd done the math 6 different ways, and no matter how he twisted the numbers, they never added up to anything good. Gas prices weren't doing him any favors, and every time his truck hiccuped or made that awful grinding sound, Malik wondered if it was finally giving up for good. The dashboard clock glowed faintly. It was closing in on midnight, and the only thing louder than the engine was the pounding in his head, that dull throb of stress and exhaustion settling behind his eyes. He was thinking about the bill notices, the phone calls he'd been avoiding, the look on his landlord's face when they passed in the parking lot earlier. All of it swirling around his tired mind like a storm he couldn't outrun. And that's probably why he almost didn't see it. Just ahead, his headlights caught the twisted wreck of something sprawled across the road's shoulder. The red gleam of mangled metal and shattered plastic, pieces scattered across the pavement like confetti from some cruel parade. It took half a second for his brain to catch up, and when it did, his foot slammed the brake pedal to the floor. The Dodge groaned in protest, but came to a lurching halt, heart hammering in his chest. Malik squinted through the windshield, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It was a motorcycle, or what was left of one. The sleek, expensive bodywork was caved in, wheels twisted at impossible angles. The frame bent like it had gone 12 rounds with a freight train. The front fairing lay shattered across the asphalt, glittering in the headlights like broken glass under a street lamp. But it wasn't the wreckage that made Malik's stomach clench. It was the figure sprawled in the tall grass, maybe 20 feet from the road, motionless except for the faintest rise and fall of their chest. "Damn!" Malik muttered under his breath, already grabbing for his phone as he threw open the driver's side door. His boots crunched over the gravel shoulder as he hurried toward the scene, the cool night air biting at his skin. The rider was young, couldn't have been more than mid-20s, a woman with tangled blonde hair spilling from beneath a cracked motorcycle helmet. Her riding jacket, designer by the look of it, was torn and smeared with blood and dirt. Her face was pale, lips trembling, eyes fluttering half open as Malik knelt beside her. Hey, don't move," he said, voice low but steady, the kind of voice you learn working jobs where accidents happen more often than they should. His thumb tapped the emergency call button, 911 already ringing in his ear. "You're gonna be all right. Help's on the way. Can you hear me?" The woman's eyes flickered, struggling to focus. Her lips parted, voice barely a whisper. "My bike, the deer. It jumped out. I couldn't." Her words trailed off into a shallow breath. Pain etched across her face. Malik scanned the roadside, but there was no sign of a deer, no mangled animal carcass, just the empty stretch of highway and the cooling metal of the wrecked motorcycle. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was keeping her conscious, keeping her calm. "What's your name?" he asked, slipping off his worn utility jacket and carefully draping it over her shivering body. "Sophia," she managed, her voice tight with fear and pain. "Sophia Bennett." "All right, Sophia, just hang in there, okay? You can move your legs?" A faint nod, followed by a wince of pain. "Good. That's good. But don't try to sit up, you just stay still till the paramedics get here." The operator on the other end of the line confirmed they were on the way. 15 minutes out at best. Malik exhaled a slow breath, glancing down at Sophia, her eyes glassy, face scratched but alive. The bike? That was totaled. But Sophia? She still had a shot. For the next 20 minutes, Malik knelt in the grass, ignoring the ache creeping into his knees, the cold wind slipping through his work shirt. Every now and then, headlights would crest the hill behind them, only to speed past without slowing, not even a tap of the brake pedal. It didn't surprise him, but it still left a sour taste in his mouth. Folks didn't stop these days. Maybe they were scared, maybe they didn't care. Either way, Sophia could have been out here all night if he hadn't come along. Finally, flashing lights filled the darkness, an ambulance and a sheriff's cruiser pulling up alongside his truck. Malik stood, stiff joint protesting as the paramedics rushed to Sophia's side. One of them, a tired-looking woman with sharp eyes, glanced over at Malik. "You ride with us?" she asked, pulling gloves on. "She's pretty shook up. Might be good for her to have a familiar face." Malik hesitated, eyes drifting to his truck, to the clock ticking away precious sleep hours he couldn't afford to lose. But the look on Sophia's face, scared, vulnerable, hanging on by a thread, made the decision easy. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'll ride along." And just like that, Malik Carter's long, exhausting, ordinary night took a turn he never saw coming. One that would change everything. The emergency room at Savannah Regional Medical Center was just as Malik expected it would be at that hour of the night. Too bright, too sterile, and filled with that uneasy buzz of controlled chaos that hospitals always seemed to carry. Nurses moved briskly down the polished hallways, the low murmur of voices drifting in and out of the waiting area, punctuated by the occasional crackle of the intercom, calling for some specialist or technician. Malik sat there, his long legs stretched out in front of him, boots still caked with Georgia red clay from the job site, the faint smell of sawdust and machine oil lingering on his clothes, blending awkwardly with a sharp tang of antiseptic that hung heavy in the air. He shifted in the hard plastic chair, his back aching from the hours spent hunched over electrical panels earlier that day, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. Sophia had been whisked away almost immediately after they arrived, the paramedics handing her off to a team of doctors who disappeared behind a set of swinging double doors. Malik had given his statement to the attending nurse, told them what happened on the roadside, how he'd found her, stayed with her, kept her talking until help arrived. After that, there was nothing to do but sit and wait, which was always the hardest part. His phone buzzed lifelessly in his pocket, dead as a doornail, battery long gone, and with it any hope of checking the time or the mountain of missed calls he was sure to have from his landlord, his boss, maybe even the temp agency that sometimes threw him last-minute work. The minutes dragged by in slow, heavy silence, broken only by the hum of the vending machines and the occasional low chatter from the night staff. Malik's eyes drifted shut more than once, exhaustion creeping in like a fog. His head lolled forward, chin brushing his chest, when a light tap on his shoulder startled him awake. Blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights, he looked up to see a tall man in blue scrubs standing over him, a clipboard in one hand, the other resting casually in his pocket. "Mr. Carter?" the man asked, his voice calm, professional, but with a thread of kindness woven through. "Malik Carter, right?" Malik sat up straighter, running a hand over his face. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Dr. Monroe. You came in with Sophia Bennett?" Malik nodded, heart giving a nervous thump in his chest. "How is she?" "She's going to be fine," Dr. Monroe assured him with a small smile. "She's got a mild concussion, some nasty bruises, a few scrapes and cuts, but no broken bones, no internal bleeding. Considering the shape of that motorcycle, I'd say she got very lucky." Malik let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, relief settling over him like a warm blanket. "Can I see her?" The doctor hesitated for half a second, then shrugged lightly. "She's been asking about you, room 212, down that hall, take a left." Pushing himself to his feet, Malik thanked the doctor and made his way down the hallway, his boots echoing softly against the tile floor. The room was quiet when he stepped inside, dimly lit, with monitors beeping softly beside the hospital bed. Sophia looked up as he entered, her blonde hair tangled but clean now, the cuts on her face cleaned and bandaged, color slowly returning to her cheeks. She looked small in that bed, vulnerable in a way that tugged unexpectedly at Malik's heart, like seeing a bird with a broken wing. In the corporate office area. "You're still here," she said softly, a tired smile curling at the corners of her mouth. "Wanted to make sure you were all right," Malik replied, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance. "Doctor says you'll live." "Barely," Sophia chuckled weakly, then winced as the movement sent a jolt of pain through her ribs. "Could have been a lot worse." Malik nodded, his gaze drifting to the IV in her arm, the faint purple bruises on her skin. "Yeah, could have." There was a pause, comfortable in its quiet, before Sophia's eyes found his again. "You never told me your name back there." Malik Carter." "Thank you, Malik," she said, her voice earnest, her eyes soft with gratitude. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped." "Anyone would have," Malik started to say, but Sophia shook her head slowly. "That's where you're wrong. The cops told me 3 cars passed before you did. 3. The words settled heavy between them, and for a moment Malik didn't know what to say. He wasn't the type to look for recognition, to expect anything for doing what he figured was just basic decency, but hearing that, knowing how long she might have been lying there alone, sent a chill down his spine. They talked for a little while longer, about nothing and everything. Malik told her about his work, the electrical jobs, the constant hustle to keep up with bills. Sophia was vague about hers, mentioning only that she helped with her family's business, her tone light but evasive in a way that told Malik she wasn't just some ordinary office worker. But he didn't press. It wasn't his place. Eventually, a nurse came in to check her vitals, reminding Malik that visiting hours were over. He stood, giving Sophia a small, tired smile. "You get some rest now. You'll be back on your feet in no time." Sophia smiled back, eyes crinkling at the corners. "I hope so." "And Malik, seriously, thank you." "Just glad I was in the right place at the right time," he replied, tipping an invisible hat as he made his way toward the door. He left the hospital some time after midnight, the cool night air wrapping around him as he climbed back into his battered truck. The engine groaned in protest but turned over, headlights flickering to life as he pulled onto the quiet road. The drive home felt longer than usual, the adrenaline wearing off, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion and the familiar hum of worry creeping back in. The rent, the bills, the job site that expected him at sunrise sharp. What he didn't know as he drove down those dark streets, watching the world blur past his window, was that stopping to help Sophia Bennett wasn't just a detour on a bad night. It was the beginning of something that would turn his whole life upside down. The next morning started the way Malik should have expected, considering the shape his life had been in lately. Rough, rushed, and spiraling downhill before he even got his boots laced. His phone, dead from the night before, still lay useless on the nightstand where he'd tossed it. By the time he cracked one eye open and realized the faint morning light sneaking through the blinds wasn't some dream, it was already 6:42 IEM. The job site was across town, a solid 30-minute drive on a good day, and the foreman, Pete Lawson, was not the kind of man who handed out second chances or understanding glances to guys who showed up late, no matter the reason. Malik cursed under his breath, scrambled out of bed, yanked on yesterday's work clothes, jeans stiff with dried dust, shirt still faintly smelling of copper wiring and sweat, and grabbed his keys on the way out the door. His old Dodge wheezed to life like a sick dog, spitting black smoke into the chilly morning air as he backed out of the gravel lot behind the apartment building, the tires crunching over the loose stones like they were carrying the weight of the world, which, in Malik's case, wasn't far off. The job site was a half-finished office complex off Route 84, all steel beams and concrete slabs rising like skeletons under the gray sky. Pete was already there, arms crossed, steelty boots planted firmly in the dirt, that permanent scowl of his set deep as the creases in his weathered face. Malik barely had both feet out of the truck before the man was barking his name across the lot, loud enough that half the crew paused what they were doing to look his way. "Is this the third time this month, Carter?" Pete snapped, the sour smell of stale coffee lingering on his breath. "I don't care what your excuse is this time, dead battery, flat tire, alien abduction, you show up late again, you can pack it up for good, you hear me?" Malik opened his mouth to explain, to say something about the hospital, the accident, but the words caught somewhere between pride and weariness. Pete wouldn't care. That's not how men like Pete operated. Work was work and everything else was noise. "I got it, boss," Malik muttered, already grabbing his tool belt from the truck bed, shoulders hunched, head down. The rest of the day crawled by in a haze of sweat, sore muscles and splinters, hauling spools of wiring across unfinished floors, crawling through dusty beams, and trying not to think about how close he was to losing the only thing standing between him and sleeping in that old truck of his. His back screamed, his knees ached, but what gnawed at him most was the quiet dread of knowing the rent was still overdue. The eviction notice still waiting like a storm cloud in his glove box, and no amount of overtime hauling wire was going to magically make the numbers add up. By the time the sun dipped low behind the tree line, casting long shadows over the raw bones of the building site, Malik's limbs felt like lead. His shirt clung to his skin, soaked through with the day's labor, and every step back to the truck felt heavier than the last. The drive home was a blur. The same back roads through Savannah, the same flickering streetlights, the same creeping thoughts clawing at the edges of his mind, until finally he pulled into the apartment complex parking lot and something felt wrong. At first, he thought maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on him, but as he stepped out of the truck, the knot in his stomach tightened. The same space he'd parked in every single day for the past 2 years, was empty. His truck wasn't there. He glanced around, heart skipping, but it made no sense. He had just driven it here. He was standing next to it. But that wasn't all. When he made his way up the concrete steps to his apartment, key in hand, that same ugly feeling wrapped around his chest like a vice. The key wouldn't turn. He tried again, jiggling it, checking the number on the door like maybe by some miracle he'd walked up to the wrong apartment. But no, same door, same key, except the lock was changed. Confused, frustration boiling in his chest, Malik knocked, hard enough to rattle the frame. No answer. The blinds were drawn tight, the windows dark, and when he cupped his hands to peer through the glass, what little he could see made his breath hitch. The apartment was empty, stripped bare. No couch, no lamp, no battered little coffee table he'd bought at a yard sale 2 years ago. Gone. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Malik Carter?" The voice startled him, low but polite, coming from the walkway behind him. Malik turned to find a woman standing there, maybe mid-40s, dressed like she belonged in a high-rise downtown, not this run-down apartment complex with cracked sidewalks and peeling paint. She held a slim briefcase in one hand, a neatly pressed blazer buttoned over a soft blue blouse, heels clicking softly against the concrete. "Yeah," Malik said slowly, pulse quickening, eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Who's asking?" "My name's Patricia Walsh," she replied, flipping open a sleek leather folder and pulling out a business card with the practiced ease of someone used to this kind of conversation. "I represent Bennett Holdings." The name meant nothing to Malik at first, just another company probably tied up in the endless shuffle of landlords, property managers, and real estate developers that passed this complex around like a bad penny. His jaw tightened. "If this is about the rent, Patricia held up a hand, her expression patient, professional, but not unkind. "Mr. Carter, this isn't what you think. Could we talk somewhere private?" Malik glanced around, the empty lot and peeling stucco buildings offering little in the way of privacy. "Lady, this is about as private as it gets. You mind telling me why I can't get into my place and where the hell my truck went?" A small smile crept onto Patricia's face, and for the first time Malik noticed the faintest glimmer of amusement. Not cruel, but like she knew something he didn't. Like she was holding the punchline to a joke he wasn't in on yet. "Mr. Carter," she said, reaching back into her briefcase and pulling out a small, polished set of keys attached to a leather keychain, along with a manila envelope thick with documents. "You haven't been evicted, quite the opposite, actually." Malik stared at her like she'd just started speaking another language. "Come again?" "Your lease has been terminated, yes, but not because you've been evicted," Patricia explained, offering the keys. "Because it's been bought out, along with everything in that apartment, which has been carefully packed and moved to your new residence." "My new residence?" Patricia's smile widened ever so slightly. "Congratulations, Mr. Carter. You're a homeowner." For a long second, Malik just stood there on that cracked sidewalk, staring at the woman like the words she'd spoken hadn't quite found their way into his brain yet, like maybe they floated somewhere between them, hanging in the humid Georgia air, waiting for him to make sense of them. A homeowner? Him. Those two words didn't belong in the same sentence, not in this lifetime, not with his bank account looking like it did and that eviction notice still wrinkled up in his glove box like a cruel little reminder of where his life was headed. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again as the gears finally started to turn. "I think you got the wrong guy," he managed, his voice low, rough with disbelief, the weight of exhaustion and suspicion pressing heavy on his chest. "I don't know anybody who'd buy me a house. Hell, I can't afford a house." Patricia didn't flinch, didn't even look surprised by his reaction. She just held out the manila envelope a little farther, like she'd had this conversation before with other people, just as stunned, just as convinced there had to be a mistake. "Mr. Carter?" she said evenly. "The house has been paid for in full, no mortgage, no strings attached, all legal, all proper." If you'll take a look inside the envelope, you'll find the deed in your name, along with all necessary documentation. The keys, of course, are yours." Malik hesitated, but curiosity gnawed at him, pushing past the haze of doubt that clouded his mind. He took the envelope with cautious fingers, flipping it open, his eyes scanning the neatly stacked documents inside. The address on top stared back at him like something from another man's life. 317 Wisteria Lane, Riverside Heights. A neighborhood that existed in the same city as him, but in a different world entirely, where houses had tidy front lawns and fresh paint, where folks walked their dogs after dark without looking over their shoulders, where the only thing peeling was the label off a new bottle of wine. His eyes moved down the page, skimming signatures, county stamps, legal jargon that all boiled down to one unbelievable truth. It was real. "And your truck," Patricia added casually, as though she were reciting the weather, "was picked up this morning by our mechanics. It's been fully serviced, detailed, and delivered to your new home. Our movers were instructed to transport your belongings there this afternoon." Malik's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "You touched my truck?" Patricia's lips twitched, the faintest ghost of a smirk crossing her face. "Only to fix what needed fixing. New transmission work, oil change, fresh tires. Trust me, Mr. Carter, it'll drive better than the day you bought it." "But why?" The words slipped out before he could stop it, heavy with the confusion twisting in his gut. None of this makes sense. Who would do all this? Patricia's eyes softened, the practiced professionalism easing for just a moment as she tilted her head, studying him like she already knew the storm of questions rattling around his head. "Because, Mr. Carter," she said gently, "you stopped when no one else did. You stayed. You made sure Sophia was safe when you had every reason to keep driving, to look the other way. Her father wanted to thank you, properly." Malik's heart stumbled over itself at the mention of Sophia. The accident, the hospital, that quiet fear in her eyes as they loaded her onto the stretcher. He hadn't thought beyond that night, hadn't expected anything, never imagined the girl lying bruised and broken in that hospital bed belonged to the Bennett family, the same Bennetts plastered across billboards and real estate signs all over the city, the same Bennetts who owned half the developments that towered over downtown like monuments to wealth and power. He ran a hand over his face, the disbelief refusing to loosen its grip. "Look," he started carefully, the words slow, deliberate, like each one had to pass through a checkpoint of doubt first. "I ain't looking for charity. I helped because that's what you're supposed to do. I wasn't expecting anything." "And yet," Patricia countered softly, "sometimes, Mr. Carter, the world surprises us in the best way." She held out a business card now, sleek, embossed with the Bennett Holdings logo, her name in clean black print below. "If you'd prefer not to accept the house, that's your choice, but the offer stands. The keys are yours. The house is legally in your name, and Mr. Bennett also asked me to extend an invitation. He's interested in meeting you. If you're willing. No obligation, of course." The words lingered between them, quiet and heavy like the humid air pressing down on the parking lot. Malik stared at the card for a moment, fingers tracing the edges, his thoughts running wild, tangled between suspicion, awe, and a growing sense of surreal wonder. A house. A real house. Not some crumbling apartment with paper-thin walls and busted locks. Not a rusty truck on its last legs. For the first time in, well, maybe his whole life, it felt like the ground wasn't shifting under him. Like maybe, just maybe, all the nights of scraping by, all the times he did the right thing with nothing to show for it, had finally led him somewhere solid. He tucked the card in his pocket, the keys heavy and cool in his hand. the manila envelope tucked under his arm, like the start of a brand new chapter he never saw coming. "All right," he said finally, his voice low but steady, the hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips despite himself. "Guess I better go see my new place." It was well past dark by the time Malik eased his freshly detailed truck down the quiet, tree-lined streets of Riverside Heights, the headlights gliding over manicured lawns, white picket fences, and front porches strung with soft golden lights like something straight off a magazine cover. It was the kind of neighborhood Malik used to drive through on the way to cheap electrical gigs, the kind of place he never dared to linger because folks around here would watch a man like him a little too closely, wondering if he belonged. But tonight, for the first time, those cautious stares were replaced by something else entirely. A brass number on a freshly painted mailbox, and a deed with his name printed clear as day. 3 and 17 Wisteria Lane. His house. The house wasn't a mansion, not like some of the sprawling estates tucked deeper into the neighborhood, but to Malik it might as well have been Buckingham Palace. A faint laugh rumbled from his chest as he stepped through the doorway, the smell of fresh paint and polished wood filling his lungs, his fingers trailing along smooth countertops, gleaming fixtures, and the kind of quiet that comes from knowing, for once, nobody's waiting to bang on the door about rent or pound on the ceiling about noise. He found the note on the kitchen island, written in tidy slanted handwriting on thick cream-colored paper that looked expensive enough to frame. "Malik, thank you for being the kind of man my father raised me to believe still exists. You stayed with me when you had every reason not to, and you never once asked for anything. I hope this small gesture shows how much your kindness meant to me." "Welcome home, Sophia," a small gesture. Malik shook his head with a quiet chuckle, the edges of disbelief softening into something warmer, deeper, like gratitude stitching itself quietly into the fabric of his bones. His phone buzzed, finally charged after being dead half the day, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. For half a second he thought about letting it go to voicemail, but something in his gut told him to answer. "Hello?" "Mr. Carter." The voice on the other end was deep, calm, carrying that quiet authority that came from years of being listened to. "This is Charles Bennett. I believe you met my daughter." Malik straightened instinctively, his free hand settling on the counter to steady himself, the weight of the moment pressing in like gravity. "Yes, sir," he managed, his voice even, respectful but not small. "I did." "She's told me a lot about you," Charles continued, the faintest warmth threading through the steel of his words. "I wanted to thank you personally. Men like you, men who do the right thing when nobody's watching, they're hard to come by." Malik cleared his throat, his fingers tightening slightly on the counter's edge. "I didn't do anything special, sir. I just stopped." There was a low chuckle on the other end, not mocking, but like a man who'd seen enough of the world to appreciate honesty when it showed up at his door. "That's where you're wrong, son. You did exactly what most folks wouldn't. You stayed, you cared, and you didn't try to turn it into a payday." Malik hesitated, unsure where the conversation was headed, but Charles filled the silence easily. "I've got a project coming up. New housing development, affordable homes, real community work. I need someone like you. Someone who knows the trades, understands hard work, and more importantly, knows how to do the right thing without needing a spotlight." Malik blinked, his heart giving an unsteady skip. "Sir, I'm not management material. I run wires and fix switches, that's it." "What you are," Charles corrected gently, "is exactly the kind of man I want on my team. The kind that shows up, does what's needed, and doesn't wait for applause. We can teach you the rest." The offer hung there, quiet and steady, as real as the keys still heavy in Malik's pocket and the deed sitting on his counter. For the first time in years, maybe his whole life, the ground beneath his feet didn't feel so shaky. Later that night, long after the call ended and the hum of disbelief finally settled into something close to hope, Malik stood on the back porch, a cold beer sweating in his hand, the warm Georgia air curling around him like a quiet promise of better days ahead. The house was still, his house, and for the first time in a long while he believed he might actually belong. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unfamiliar number. "Hey, it's Sophia. Dad told me he offered you a job. You should take it. The company could use more good folks like you. P.S. The new bike's great. I'm sticking to the main roads this time." Malik smiled, the kind of quiet, easy smile that settles deep into a man's chest when the weight of the world finally lets up, even just a little. His thumbs hovered over the keys for a moment before he typed back, "Glad you're okay. And yeah, I think I will." Sometimes, Malik thought as he watched the stars stretch across the night sky, all it takes to change your whole life is a moment, a simple choice, to stop, to help, to care. And when you do, sometimes the world finally notices.